Hey, welcome back. This is StudMuffin 1986. Welcome back to another video of World of Tanks Blitz. I'm going to be going over, I think, what could help a lot of players, which is understanding light tanks. Light tanks, in my opinion, are, or can be, one of the hardest types of tanks to play in the game. And the reason why is you really have zero armor to rely on. A lot of other types of tanks, like heavy tanks, you can rely on armor. Even with a lot of medium tanks, you can rely on some kind of armor. But with light tanks, these are some of the most commonly misused type of tanks in the game. And the thing about them is a lot of people may complain about them or say they're completely useless or they hate playing with them. And I get it. I totally get it, because there's light tanks can't deal with certain situations that other tanks can, and you have to know how to really work the map. You have to really know and be very conscious about where people are, where your team is, the enemy is, how to utilize the map, how to spot, give eyes to your enemies, be able to be, you got to be very mobile. And so I'm going to just touch on some tips and tricks. Hopefully it helps some players on some real effective light tank gameplay. So I don't proclaim to be the best, but I do have some replays here and some techniques. Hopefully you can learn a few things. So going into it, with a light tank, number one, at the beginning, your job is to spot, give your team some eyes on where the enemy is. You want to get to effective positions on maps, and it's different for every different type of map, but you want to get yourself into an effective spot where you can detect the enemy, and sometimes not just shoot right at the beginning. You want to sometimes sit there, detect one, maybe two, get a feel for the direction of where they're going, and it'll help your team also give them a great sense of how to position themselves on the battlefield and know the enemy position, give your team the advantage to be much more likely to win the game if you can just give your team some eyes on where the enemy is. Another thing about light tanks is that a lot of people have this misconception that because you don't have a lot of armor, that you need to keep extreme distances between those you're encountering or attacking, which is totally not the case. The whole thing about a light tank is you don't want to be in the back trying to perform and do what a tank destroyer's role is supposed to be doing. That's not the purpose of a light tank. You still need to engage and encounter your enemies utilizing your maneuverability in a way that doesn't cause you to be the focus or center of attention on an enemy, but in a way that you're moving about, paying attention in an engaged way that is being able to come up on them, taking shots while they're distracted, maybe looking in a different way where they're focused maybe on another one of your teammates, coming up behind them, to the sides of them. You're never wanting to engage a heavy tank from the front, or when they're completely focused on you, because if you're doing that, then you're playing the tank incorrectly. You need to be sneaking around, paying attention to your map, kind of looking around, seeing if you can spot someone that's either distracted and engage them correctly. So that's probably number two. The third thing is you never want to brawl with a light tank. It never ends well with a light tank because you have no armor. You have nothing to protect yourself. Getting yourself in a brawled situation is just going to get really sticky, and with most tanks you're encountering, you're just going to get completely messed up. And so in order to properly sometimes engage enemies, I always take into consideration what's called a two barrier approach, meaning you have two barriers between you and an enemy. Most of the time when you're engaging them, trying to find those different shots or angles to get in and then out again to approach them. So what I mean by that is two barriers could be like two hills, and your two ditches in a place that would cause them, if they did turn and focus toward you, you could easily escape and get out of there, but you're still able to effectively engage them. So maybe that's a stupid example, but another one could be if they're maybe behind a building and then there's another building, a second building that you're behind, popping out and trying to get a shot off of them. Or like I said, I mean, when they're behind a hill, but enough to be exposed to get shots off of them, but you're another two hills, or you have two barriers in front of you. So what I mean by that is that if they ever try to turn and focus on you, you have an easy escape, a way to get out of there and distract them so that they can't quickly turn on you and things can get nasty. So I don't know if that made any sense, but if I need to make maybe a little bit more of a video on that or explain that better, just let me know. The third thing is relocation and utilizing your speed and your spotting capabilities. So if you do get spotted and an enemy's focused on you, it's just best to relocate. You've got the speed, you can do it. Get yourself to another spot. You can disappear off the enemy's radar, and then you can utilize that light tank's advantage to spot them first and get a shot off, and then once again relocate if needs be. The other thing that comes to mind is knowing how to properly circle of death an enemy. I see this a lot where light tanks will just zoom right into where a heavy tank is, have no consideration of what's going on around them, and they just get absolutely wrecked. There's a lot of different ways on how to properly approach doing a circle of death method, and a lot of it comes down to, number one, where is the enemy located? Number two, are they slow enough in a way that you can circle of death them? And number three, are they in a location or spot that's going to allow you to do that? So what I mean by all this is, if they're a heavy tank or a tank destroyer with very limited mobility capability, then number one, you got that checked off. Number two, are they in a position on a map that's situationally appropriate to go in and circle of death? Meaning, do they have teammates around them that could just obliterate you while you're trying to circle of death them? You want to make sure that the enemy tank is fairly alone and out in the open. The number three, dealing with the location, is it a heavy tank that's backed up between a lot of tight places or buildings? You can't circle of death. If any of those are not in your favor, then you cannot circle of death a enemy tank. It just will not work. You're either going to get obliterated by their teammates, you're either going to get wedged or smashed up against a building. You can't circle of death another tank that has very quick traverse or maneuverability speed like another medium or light tank. It just doesn't make any sense. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of insight on how to play with a light tank. I know there's some technicality around how to play with these things. They can be a bit difficult. Just remember the two barrier ways of engagement. But first and foremost, at the very beginning of the game, give your team some eyes. Help them know where they're going so your team can position themselves. Number two, don't just sit back and snipe. Engage the enemy. but do it in a way that you're sneaking around, using your maneuverability, taking shots off in a way that you're not the focus point of them trying to get you. Number 3, knowing how to do the circle of death in a proper way. Number 4 is dropping off the radar, coming back in, using that maneuverability around the map and your view range. So once again, Stud Muffin 1986, hope this helps all you tankers out there, and see you guys next time.